I'm Sarah. Today I'm going to read you the story of Zoya, which is titled like this. After returning from a trip, I found my things on the lawn with a note. If you want to stay here, live in the basement. So, I moved into my secret apartment and canceled all payments. 6 months later, they showed up to move in with me. Well, let's go. I'm Zoya, and I'm 29 years old. 2 years ago, my life took a turn I never expected. I was living in a rented apartment, working as a software developer, making decent money and enjoying my independence. Then, my parents called me with that conversation no one wants to have. "Zoya, we need to talk," my mom said over the phone. Her voice sounded strained, tired. "Can you come over tonight?" When I got to their house, both my parents were sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread everywhere. Dad looked older than his 58 years, and Mom was wringing her hands like she always did when she was stressed. "What's going on?" I asked, sitting down across from them. Dad cleared his throat. "I had to quit my job last month. The back problems got worse and I can't do construction work anymore. I've been looking for something else, but nothing pays enough." My stomach dropped. I knew Dad had been having health issues, but I didn't realize how bad it had gotten. "We can't make the mortgage payments," Mom continued. "I'm still working at the grocery store, but it's only part-time. We bring in maybe $1,200 a month now, and the mortgage alone is $1,800. That's when they asked me to move back in and help with the payments. They didn't want to lose the house they'd lived in for 20 years. I looked around at the kitchen, where I'd eaten breakfast every morning as a kid, at the living room, where we'd watched movies together, at the backyard where Dad had taught me to ride a bike. "Of course," I said. "I'll help." So, I gave up my apartment and moved back into my childhood bedroom. It felt weird at first, sleeping in the same room where I'd done homework and had sleepovers with friends. But I set up my computer in the corner, got a good internet connection, and made it work. Most of my job was remote anyway, so it didn't matter where I lived. The arrangement worked out better than I expected. I made good money as a developer, around $85,000 a year in salary. But the real money came from bonuses. Every time one of my programs got sold to a big tech company, I got a percentage. Some months, I'd make an extra $10,000 or $15,000 just from those bonuses. I used my regular salary to cover the mortgage, utilities, groceries, car insurance, and other family expenses. It wasn't a burden because I was used to living on that amount anyway. But here's what my family didn't know. I was putting every single bonus into a separate savings account. I never told them about the bonus money, not my parents, not my older brother Marcus, who lived across town with his wife Sandra and their 2 kids. I loved my family, but I knew what would happen if they found out about my real income. They'd find ways to spend it. Marcus was always asking for money. "Hey Zoya, can you lend me $500? Tommy needs new soccer cleats, and Sandra wants to redo the kitchen." Or "Zoya, Sandra's mom needs surgery, and we're short on the bills." I helped when I could from my regular salary, but I kept quiet about the bonuses. In 2 years, I'd saved up almost $180,000. I was planning to buy my own place soon, maybe a nice condo downtown. Everything was going smoothly except for family dinners. Marcus and Sandra came over every Sunday, and those meals were torture. Sandra had never liked me, and she made sure I knew it. "Zoya, what is that shirt?" Sandra would say, looking at me like I'd crawled out of a dumpster. "You dress like you're still in high school. Don't you care about your appearance?" Marcus would laugh. "Sandra's just trying to help you, sis. She knows about fashion." The worst part was watching Sandra show off clothes she'd bought with money Marcus had borrowed from me. She'd parade around in a new designer dress, talking about how important it was to invest in quality pieces. I usually escaped to my room as soon as I could, claiming I had work to do. I'd hear Sandra's voice carry up the stairs. There she goes again, running back to hide in her little bubble. She'll never grow up if she keeps avoiding real life. But I kept my mouth shut and kept saving money. Soon, I'd have enough for a down payment on my own place, and I wouldn't have to deal with Sandra's comments anymore. The routine became normal after a while. I'd wake up, make coffee, check my emails, and start coding. My parents would be quiet in the mornings. Dad usually sitting in his recliner, watching the news. Mom getting ready for her shift at the store. We'd eat dinner together most nights, and it was actually nice having that family time again. But then Sunday would come around, and Marcus would pull up in his driveway with Sandra and the kids, 8-year-old Tommy and 6-year-old Emma would burst through the door, and Sandra would follow behind, already looking for something to criticize. "Oh, Zoya, you're wearing that old sweater again," she'd say, not even bothering with hello. "Don't you have anything that fits you properly?" I'd look down at my perfectly fine wool sweater, the one I'd bought just last month. "It's comfortable," I'd say. "Comfortable isn't everything," Sandra would reply, smoothing down her own expensive blouse. "A woman needs to make an effort." The kids would run around the house, and Sandra would plant herself on the couch like she owned the place. She'd start telling my parents about her latest shopping trips, her yoga classes, her friends' drama. Meanwhile, Marcus would be in the kitchen with Dad, talking about sports or complaining about his job. "Marcus is working so hard," Sandra would announce. "He deserves a promotion, but his boss doesn't appreciate him." I'd bite my tongue, remembering all the times Marcus had called me, asking for money because he'd been passed over for a raise or bonus. He was a good guy, but he wasn't the most reliable employee. Sandra, however, made it sound like he was the hardest worker in America. The worst part was when Sandra would start giving me life advice. "You know, Zoya, you should be dating, having fun, maybe thinking about starting a family of your own." What she didn't understand was that I was perfectly happy with my life. I had a good job, I was helping my parents, and I was building a future for myself. I didn't need her approval or her advice. I needed a break from the family drama, so I visited my friend Jessica at her country house for the weekend. When I came back Sunday night, I saw too many cars in the driveway and lights on in every room. I walked up to the front door and saw toys scattered on the porch. I opened the door to chaos. Tommy and Emma were running around the living room. Marcus was carrying boxes upstairs, and Sandra was directing everything like she owned the place. "What's going on?" I asked, standing in the doorway with my overnight bag. Everyone stopped and looked at me. My parents came out of the kitchen looking guilty. Marcus sat down his box. "Hey sis, so there's been a change of plans. I lost my job, and we can't afford rent anymore." I looked around at all the boxes and furniture. "So you're staying here?" "Just temporarily," Marcus said, "until I find something new." Sandra walked over with her fake smile. "We really appreciate you letting us stay here. Of course, we'll need to make adjustments to the sleeping arrangements. Your room would be perfect for the kids. You can move into the small room at the end of the hall." "I'm not moving out of my room," I said firmly. "I work from home. I need my computer set up and good internet." Sandra's smile got tighter. "Well, I think the children's needs should come first." "And I'm the one paying the mortgage and bills?" I shot back. Sandra crossed her arms. "Well, that doesn't give you the right to be selfish about a bedroom. We're family." "Family that never asked if I wanted house guests," I replied. "Fine," Sandra said when I refused to budge. "Keep your precious room, but don't expect us to be grateful when you can't even be considerate to family in need." I went upstairs and closed the door. That's how their invasion of our house began. Life became a nightmare after that. The house was constantly noisy and chaotic. Tommy and Emma ran through every room, screaming and fighting. Marcus spent his days on the couch watching TV and making half-hearted phone calls about job interviews that never seemed to materialize. "I'm still looking," he'd tell me when I asked about his job search. "The market is tough right now." Days turned into weeks, and he was no closer to finding work or an apartment. Meanwhile, Sandra acted like she was doing us a favor by being there. The worst part was trying to work. The kids would bang on my door, run past my room screaming, and interrupt my video calls with clients. I couldn't concentrate on anything. "Can you please keep the kids quieter during my work hours?" I asked Marcus one morning, after Tommy had spent 20 minutes kicking a ball against the wall next to my room. "They're just being kids," he said, not looking up from his phone. "You don't understand because you don't have any. I tried talking to my parents about it, but they said the same thing." "You're overreacting, honey," Mom said. "Children need to play. You can't expect them to be silent all day." "I'm not asking for silence," I said. "I'm asking for basic consideration so I can do my job." But nobody listened. If anything, Sandra seemed to encourage the kids to be louder after our conversations. The breaking point came 2 months later. I had been out running errands for a few hours, and when I came back, my internet wasn't working. I went to check the router in my room and found that someone had cut the Ethernet cable with scissors. The wire was cleanly snipped in 2 pieces. I was furious. I stormed downstairs with the cut wire in my hand. "Who did this?" I demanded, holding up the cable. Sandra was sitting on the couch painting her nails. She looked at the wire and started laughing. "Oh, that," she said, like it was no big deal. "Tommy was playing with scissors and must have gotten into your room. Kids will be kids." "This isn't funny," I said. "I have a deadline tomorrow and now I can't work." Sandra shrugged. "Maybe you should lock your door if you're so worried about your precious computer stuff." "Maybe you should watch your kid and teach him not to destroy other people's property," I shot back. That's when Sandra's fake sweetness disappeared completely. "Don't you dare tell me how to raise my children. You have no idea what it's like to be a parent." "I know what it's like to have respect for other people's things," I said. "Tommy is 6 years old," Sandra said, standing up. "He doesn't understand your work stuff, but you're a grown woman who should understand that accidents happen. Cutting wires with scissors isn't an accident," I said. "It's destruction." Marcus came into the room then, along with my parents. When I explained what happened, I expected them to back me up. Instead, Marcus just sighed. "Look, sis, I'm sorry about your internet, but Sandra's right. You don't have kids, so you don't get how hard it is to watch them every second." "I'm not asking you to watch them every second," I said. "I'm asking you to teach them not to come into my room and break my things." "Boys his age are naturally curious," Mom said. "You used to get into everything when you were little." "I never destroyed anything with scissors," I replied. Dad nodded, along with everyone else. "You're being too harsh, Zoya. It's just a wire. You can buy a new one." I couldn't believe it. My own family was taking Sandra's side over mine, and I was the one paying for their roof over their heads. After that fight, everything changed. My parents barely spoke to me anymore. Marcus avoided me completely. Sandra would smirk whenever she saw me, like she'd won some kind of victory. The house felt cold and hostile. I spent most of my time locked in my room, trying to work around the constant noise and chaos. This was supposed to be temporary, but it felt like it would never end. Then I got the bonus I'd been waiting for. One of my programs had been sold to a major tech company, and the payment was huge, almost $60,000. It brought my total savings up to nearly $240,000, more than enough for what I'd been planning. I'd been secretly working with a realtor for months. Dave Patterson was a friend from college who'd gotten into real estate, and I'd asked him to keep his eyes open for the right place. I wanted something modern, quiet, and completely mine. I think I found it. Dave called me 3 weeks after the bonus came through. 2-bedroom condo downtown, great building, perfect for someone who works from home. Want to see it? The apartment was everything I'd dreamed of. Floor-to-ceiling windows, hardwood floors, and a separate office space where I could work without interruption. The building had a gym, and best of all, no screaming children. "I'll take it," I told Dave before we'd even finished the tour. The paperwork moved fast. I put down $100,000 and got approved for the mortgage easily. My income and credit score were excellent, and I was buying well within my means. Within 2 weeks, I was signing the final documents. I was officially a homeowner. I had my own place, my escape route from the chaos at my parents' house. The keys were in my hand, but I decided not to tell my family yet. I wanted to have a plan before I made my move. That's when my boss called. "Zoya, I have an opportunity for you," Jennifer said. "There's a programmers conference in Seattle. 2 weeks, all expenses paid. Some of the biggest names in tech will be there, and I think you'd get a lot out of it." I looked around my room, listening to Emma crying in the hallway and Tommy banging on something downstairs. 2 weeks away from this house sounded like paradise. "I'll take it," I said. When I told my family I was leaving for a business trip, they barely reacted. Nobody asked where I was going, what the conference was about, or when exactly I'd be back. They didn't seem to care at all. The conference was amazing. I met other developers and felt like myself again for the first time in months. I stayed in a quiet hotel room where nobody bothered me. I didn't call home once during those 2 weeks, and more telling, nobody called me either. When my flight landed, I took a taxi home. The taxi pulled into the driveway, and I immediately knew something was wrong. I got out with my suitcase and saw garbage bags scattered across the front lawn. As I got closer, I realized they weren't garbage bags. They were my things. My clothes, my books, my personal belongings, all stuffed into black trash bags and dumped on the grass like actual garbage. I walked up to the front door and knocked. I could hear voices inside, then footsteps. The door opened, and there stood my whole family: Mom, Dad, Marcus, and Sandra. They were all looking at me like I was an unwelcome visitor. "What is this?" I asked, pointing at the bags on the lawn. Mom looked uncomfortable, but Sandra stepped forward with that smug smile I'd grown to hate. "We've made some changes while you were gone," Sandra announced. "The kids needed more space, so we converted your room into a proper playroom for them." I stared at her. "You what?" "The children are growing, and they need a place to play safely," Mom said, not meeting my eyes. "We fixed up the basement for you. It's actually quite nice now." I remembered the basement. Dark, damp, with tiny windows near the ceiling and concrete walls. It smelled like mildew and had terrible cell phone reception. "It's been completely cleaned," Dad said. "We put in a bed and everything." Sandra was practically glowing with satisfaction. "Of course, if you don't like the arrangement, you're always free to find your own place. You're 29 years old after all. Most people your age don't live with their parents." I looked at my parents, waiting for them to say something, to stand up for me, to acknowledge what I'd been doing for them. But they just stood there, avoiding eye contact. Then I did something that surprised even me. I smiled at them, a real, genuine smile. "You know what?" I said cheerfully. "You're absolutely right, Sandra. I should find my own place. But I'm curious, how exactly are you planning to pay the mortgage without my money?" Marcus straightened up, looking proud. "Actually, I found a job last week. Good salary, too. We'll be fine without your help." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. This was perfect. "That's wonderful news," I said, still smiling. "I'm so happy for all of you." "Well then, I guess this works out perfectly for everyone. I'm leaving." They all looked surprised by my reaction. They'd expected me to beg, or argue, or get upset. Instead, I was acting like they'd just done me a favor. Sandra's smile got whiter and nastier. "Good. It's about time you learned to stand on your own 2 feet. My parents still weren't saying much, but they weren't stopping this either." "Great," I said. "I'm so glad we're all in agreement." They all went back inside, and I heard the door slam shut behind them. No goodbye, no good luck, no acknowledgement of everything I'd done for them over the past 2 years. Just a slammed door. I pulled out my phone and called the moving company I'd already researched weeks ago. I considered not answering, but curiosity got the better of me. How had they even found my address? I opened the door but didn't invite them in. "How did you find me?" I asked. "Your friend Jessica told us," Mom said, looking embarrassed. "Of course she did." I made a mental note to have a conversation with Jessica about boundaries. "What do you want?" I asked. Sandra immediately pushed past me into my apartment without being invited. The rest of them followed, and suddenly my peaceful sanctuary was invaded again. "Nice place," Sandra said, looking around with obvious jealousy. "Must cost a fortune." "What do you want?" I repeated, not moving from the doorway. Marcus looked uncomfortable. "Well, the thing is, I lost my job again 2 months ago." I wasn't surprised. And we're having trouble with the mortgage payments," Dad said. I almost laughed. "Let me guess, you want me to start paying for you again?" "We're family," Mom said desperately. "We need to help each other." "Help each other?" I said. "When exactly have any of you helped me?" "Look," Dad said, "we know things got heated before, but we can work this out. You could move back in, help us get back on our feet." "Move back into the basement, you mean?" Nobody answered that. "We've been thinking," Mom continued, "and if they foreclose on the house, we'll have to move in with you." I stared at her. "Excuse me?" "Well, where else would we go?" Sandra said with that familiar smugness. "We're family. You can't just abandon us." That's when I started laughing. Really laughing. The kind of deep belly laugh that comes from pure disbelief. "You think I'm going to let you move in here?" I said when I could speak again. "After you threw my belongings on the lawn and told me to live in a basement?" "That was different," Marcus said weakly. You're right, it was different, I said. It was the moment I realized exactly what you all thought of me. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Zoya, please, we're desperate. You should have thought about that before you decided I wasn't worth basic respect. We never said that, Dad protested. You didn't have to say it. You showed it every single day. Sandra's constant insults, the kids destroying my things, none of you standing up for me when I was literally paying for your lives. We were grateful, Mom said. No, you weren't. You were entitled. There's a difference. Sandra's fake sweetness was completely gone now. You know what? You're exactly what I always said you were, a bitter, selfish woman who doesn't understand what family means. You're right, I said. I don't understand your version of family, where one person does everything and gets treated like garbage in return. I walked to my door and opened it. I want all of you to leave, now. Zoya, wait, Marcus said. Can't we just talk about this? We just did. The answer is no, to all of it. I'm not paying your mortgage. I'm not letting you move in here. Family doesn't treat each other the way you treated me, I said. Now get out. They left, but not quietly. Sandra called me names as she walked down the hall. Marcus muttered about how I'd regret this. My parents just looked defeated. I closed the door and turned the deadbolt. For the next few weeks, they tried calling from different numbers, but I never answered. They sent texts from borrowed phones, emails from new accounts, all begging for money or threatening to show up again. I blocked every single one. 3 months later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that the house had been foreclosed on. My parents had moved into a small apartment across town. Marcus and Sandra were living with her parents, which I found hilarious, since Sandra had always talked about how much she hated her mother. I felt nothing when I heard the news. No guilt, no sadness, no regret. Just relief that I'd gotten out when I did. My life kept getting better. I got promoted at work. I started dating someone seriously. I traveled to 3 different countries. I bought myself a car I'd always wanted. Most importantly, I learned what it felt like to be valued and respected. My boyfriend appreciated everything I did for him and showed it. My friends were grateful when I helped them and never took it for granted. I finally understood what healthy relationships looked like. Sometimes, I wonder if my family ever thinks about how differently things could have gone if they'd just treated me with basic respect. If Sandra had kept her mouth shut. If my parents had stood up for me. If Marcus had actually looked for work instead of playing games on the couch. But then, I remember that I'm better off without them. Some people will take everything you give them and still demand more. Some people see kindness as weakness and generosity as obligation.